I didn't just walk into the wrong room. I commandeered the Alpha King's personal sanctuary and treated him like a cabana boy. Most women dream of meeting their fated mate in a moonlit meadow, surrounded by flowers and destiny. I met mine while he was dripping wet, wearing nothing but a towel that defied the laws of physics, and looking at me like I was a snack he hadn't decided to eat yet. I didn't bow. I didn't tremble. I told him to put his abs away and fix my zipper, because I was late for a meeting. I tipped the most dangerous predator on the planet $5 for his service. And the worst part? He didn't punish me. He kept the money. And now, he's coming to collect the interest. Welcome back to Raven's Library. I love seeing how global this community is becoming. So before we dive into the drama, pause for a second and let me know in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? Rep your city or country right now. I want to see how far our pack reaches today. And listen, if you hate waiting for cliffhangers, hit that join button below. Our members get exclusive early access to new uploads and those custom loyalty badges to stand out in the comments. Join the inner circle, grab your snacks, and let's get into the story. Chapter 1. The Wrong Door. I slammed the heavy mahogany door shut behind me, engaging the lock with a satisfying click that echoed off the marble walls. I let out a breath that was 90% stress and 10% profanity. Finally, I muttered, leaning my forehead against the cool wood of the doorframe. 5 minutes. Just give me 5 minutes without a pack of sycophants asking me about branding strategies or sniffing my hair. My hands flew behind my back, fingers scrabbling uselessly at the invisible zipper of my couture gown. It was stuck just below my shoulder blades, exposing enough skin to be scandalous and tight enough to restrict my breathing to shallow, panicked sips. I had paid $3,000 for this dress to impress the Obsidian Council, and now it was trying to strangle me before I could even pitch my slide deck. I tugged. Hard. Nothing happened. The fabric didn't budge. "Come on, you overpriced polyester traitor," I hissed, twisting my torso in a way that probably looked like a feral cat chasing its tail. "Don't do this to me. Not today." I turned around, fully expecting to see a vanity mirror, a stack of plush towels, and maybe a complimentary mint on a pillow. This was the VIP wing, after all. I assumed I'd ducked into a staff changing room or a private powder room. I didn't see a mint. I saw steam, clouds of it, rolling across black marble floors that cost more than my apartment building. And through the mist, standing in the center of the room like a statue carved out of sin and arrogance, was a man. He was massive. That was my first coherent thought. He took up too much space, his shoulders broad enough to carry a mountain, his skin glistening with water droplets that tracked slow, tantalizing paths down a chest defined by hard, brutal muscle. He was facing away from me, drying his hair with a towel, but he froze the moment I spoke. He slowly lowered the towel. He didn't scramble to cover himself. He didn't yelp. He simply turned around with the lethargic grace of an apex predator who knows he has nothing to fear in this world. He was wearing a towel around his hips. Just a towel. And it was riding dangerously, illegally low. My brain short-circuited. I should have apologized. I should have backed out slowly. But my adrenaline was spiking. My zipper was still stuck. And I had exactly 3 minutes before I lost the biggest contract of my career. My fight or flight response didn't choose flight. It chose audacity. "You're not the maid," I snapped, my voice echoing in the cavernous bathroom. The man stared at me. His eyes were the color of molten gold, burning with an intensity that should have set off the fire sprinklers. He blinked once, a slow, deliberate movement. "No," he said. His voice was a deep, gravelly rumble that I felt in the soles of my feet. It vibrated through the floorboards and straight up my spine. "I am certainly not." He took a step toward me. Water dripped from the ends of his dark hair onto his chest. He didn't look angry. He looked fascinated, like he'd just found a strange bug on his windshield. "Well, you'll have to do," I said, waving a dismissive hand at his semi-nudity. "I don't have time to find someone on the payroll. Listen, Magic Mike, put the abs away for 2 seconds and help me. My zipper is jammed, and if I don't get it up, I'm going to flash the entire board of directors." The man stopped. A dark eyebrow arched upward. The corner of his mouth twitched, not a smile, but the threat of one. "Magic Mike?" he repeated, tasting the words like they were foreign currency. "Yes, you, the eye candy," I said, turning my back to him and sweeping my hair over my shoulder to expose the problem. "Come on, chop chop. I'm assuming you have hands. Use them." The silence that followed was heavy. It was thick with steam and the scent of rain and cedarwood, a scent so potent it made my wolf pace restlessly in the back of my mind. Usually my wolf ignored men. She found them boring. But right now she was sitting up, tail wagging, paying very close attention. "You want me," the man said, his voice dropping an octave, sounding closer now, right behind my ear. "To zip your dress?" "I want you to fix the problem so I can go do my job," I retorted, looking at his reflection in the mirror across the room. He was towering over me now. The heat radiating off his body was overwhelming. "Unless you want a tip for standing there looking pretty, I've got a $5 bill in my clutch with your name on it if you can get me out of here in under 60 seconds. "A tip," he murmured. I felt his fingers brush against the bare skin of my back. His hands were large, rough, and shockingly cold against my flushed skin. The contrast sent a jolt of electricity through me that nearly made my knees buckle. I gasped, bracing myself against the doorframe. He didn't pull away. He traced the line of my spine with his thumb, slow and agonizingly deliberate. It wasn't the touch of a servant. It was the touch of an owner inspecting his property. "You have no idea," he whispered, his breath hot against the nape of my neck, "what you have just walked into, little wolf." "Less talking," I commanded, my voice shaking slightly despite my best efforts to remain fierce. "More zipping." He chuckled, a dark, resonant sound that wrapped around my lungs and squeezed. "As you command," he said, and then he pulled. Chapter 2. Fix Me, Magic Mike. The sound of the zipper moving was the loudest thing in the universe. It wasn't a quick zip, a helpful tug to get me on my way. No, this man, this stranger I had commandeered like a piece of office equipment, was taking his time. He was moving the metal slider up the track of my dress with the agonizing slowness of a man defusing a bomb, or perhaps a man savoring a very expensive glass of wine. "Is there a mechanical issue back there?" I asked, my voice pitching up slightly. I cleared my throat, trying to regain my composure. "Or are you paid by the hour?" "I'm merely being careful," he murmured. His voice was closer now, much closer. I could feel the heat radiating from his chest, a stark contrast to the damp coolness of the room. "This silk is delicate. It would be a tragedy to tear it." "It's satin blend, and it's tougher than it looks," I shot back, staring resolutely at the black marble tiles ahead of me. "Just like me, so pull." He didn't speed up. If anything, he slowed down. I felt his knuckles brush against my spine, right between my shoulder blades. His skin was rough, calloused in a way that didn't match the luxury of the hotel suite. These were working hands, or fighting hands. The friction sent a shiver racing down my back that had absolutely nothing to do with the air conditioning. My wolf, the traitorous little beast, let out a low purr in the back of my mind. She liked his proximity. She liked the way he smelled, like ozone and dark, untouched forests. "You're tense," he observed. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered with a hint of amusement that made my hackles rise. "I'm late," I corrected him. "There's a difference, and you are currently the primary obstacle between me and a very lucrative contract." "Is that so?" His breath ghosted over the sensitive skin at the nape of my neck. I involuntarily leaned forward, trying to escape the overwhelming presence of him, but he stepped in, closing the gap. He wasn't touching me, not really, but he was surrounding me. "And what makes you think this contract is more important than this?" "Than a stuck zipper?" I scoffed. "Everything is more important than a stuck zipper. Now, are you done back there, or do I need to call maintenance?" "Patience, little wolf," he whispered. The nickname again. It sounded patronizing coming from a towel-clad stranger, yet strangely intimate. With one final deliberate tug, the zipper slid into place at the top of my dress. The fabric cinched tight against my skin, holding me together, restoring my dignity. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The cool air of the bathroom no longer touched my back, but the phantom sensation of his fingers lingered there, burning like a brand. "There," he said, his voice deep and satisfied. "Secure." I spun around on my heel, ready to give him a curt nod and bolt for the door. But turning around was a tactical error, because now I was facing him again, and he was still half naked, and he was standing way too close. Up close, the valet was even more devastating. He had a scar running along his collarbone, a thin white line that disappeared under the towel. His eyes were locked on mine, golden and unblinking, filled with a terrifying amount of intelligence. He didn't look like a man who took orders. He looked like a man who gave them, and God help anyone who disobeyed. But I wasn't anyone. I was Sienna, and I didn't have time to be intimidated by a gym rat with a god complex. "About time," I said, smoothing down the front of my dress with shaking hands. "You possess a startling lack of urgency for someone in the service industry." He tilted his head, a wet lock of hair falling over his forehead. "The service industry," he repeated slowly. "Yes, you know, customer satisfaction, speed, efficiency." I raised an eyebrow. "You might want to work on that if you want to keep working in a high-end place like this. The guests expect hustle." He stared at me, his lips curving into a smirk that was equal parts dangerous and dazzling. "I will keep that in mind." "Good." I took a step back, needing to put distance between us before I did something stupid, like ask him what cologne he was wearing or touch that scar. "Now, I believe I owe you something for the manual labor." Chapter 3. The $5 Insult. The silence in the room was so thick you could carve it with a knife. He was just watching me with those predatory golden eyes that seemed to strip away the satin dress I'd just fought so hard to get into. He wasn't moving. He wasn't asking if I needed anything else. He was just existing, forcefully. I needed to reestablish the hierarchy. He was the staff. I was the guest. Technically, I was a vendor, but he didn't need to know that. I needed to turn this weird, highly charged encounter back into a simple transaction. I needed to pay him off so I could leave without feeling like I owed him a piece of my soul. I snapped open my clutch, my fingers digging past my lipstick and my breath mints until I found the small fold of cash I kept for emergencies. I pulled out a bill. $5. It was wrinkled. It had a small tear in the corner. It was pathetic. But it was all the cash I had on hand. "Here," I said, thrusting the crumpled bill toward his chest. I didn't want to touch him again, so I held it out like I was offering a treat to a particularly large, potentially rabid dog. For your trouble. He looked down at the bill. Then he looked back up at me. His expression was unreadable, caught somewhere between shock and a dark, blooming delight. He made no move to take it. Take it, I urged, shaking the bill slightly. It's standard tipping protocol. Don't make it weird. $5, he said flatly. Don't spend it all on hair gel, I quipped, my defense mechanism of sarcasm kicking into overdrive. Although, judging by the amount of product you must use to keep that look, this might only cover the tax. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, he reached out. His hand engulfed mine as he took the bill. His fingers closed over the paper, brushing against my palm. The contact was electric. It zapped straight up my arm and settled heavy in my chest. He didn't let go immediately. He held the bill, and by extension, he held me. You are tipping me, he said, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper that made my toes curl in my heels. $5 for zipping your dress. Consider it a bonus for not making me ask twice, I said, snatching my hand back as if I'd been burned. I took another step toward the door, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. And next time, try locking the door if you're going to parade around in a towel. It's unprofessional. Unprofessional, he echoed. The smirk on his face widened, revealing a glimpse of white, sharp teeth. I'll be sure to bring it up with management. You do that. I grabbed the doorknob, desperate for the hallway, for oxygen, for sanity. And fix your towel. It's crooked. I didn't wait for a response. I yanked the door open and practically threw myself into the corridor. I slammed the heavy wood shut behind me, putting 3 inches of mahogany between me and the golden-eyed man who made the air feel too thin. I stood there for a second, leaning back against the door, gasping for air. My skin was flushed, my zipper was fixed. I was safe. But even through the thick wood, I could have sworn I heard him laugh. It wasn't a nice laugh. It was a dark, rich sound, like a king who had just found a new jester to entertain him. Pull it together, Sienna, I whispered to myself, smoothing my hair. He's just a valet. A hot, arrogant, weirdly intense valet. You will never see him again. I pushed off the door and marched down the hallway, the click of my heels sounding like gunshots in the quiet corridor. I had a pitch to make. I had an empire to build. I didn't have time for towel-clad distractions. But as I rounded the corner toward the ballroom, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just made a mistake. A very expensive mistake. Chapter 4. The Paranoia. The transition from the silent, steam-filled intimacy of the VIP suite to the obsidian ballroom was like walking into a jet engine. The double doors swung open, and I was instantly assaulted by a wall of sound, the clinking of crystal, the roar of polite conversation, the sweeping swell of a string quartet playing a classical cover of a pop song I couldn't quite place. The air smelled of expensive perfume, roast duck, and anxiety. This was my arena. This was where I thrived. I took a deep breath, forcing the image of the golden-eyed man out of my head. I adjusted my dress, which stayed perfectly in place thanks to him, and put on my war paint, a dazzling, confident smile that said, I belong here, and I charge double for weekends. Sienna! A voice called out. I turned to see Vargo, a rival PR rep from the Southern Pack, holding a champagne flute and looking smug. I didn't think you'd make it. We heard there was an incident with your wardrobe. News traveled faster than light in this pack. Minor malfunction, I said smoothly, grabbing a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray. Fixed it myself. Unlike your last campaign, Vargo, which I hear is still broken. He scowled, but I didn't stick around to watch it deepen. I weaved through the crowd, my eyes scanning for the Obsidian Council members. I needed to find Elder Thomas. He was the key to the contract. But as I moved through the sea of velvet and diamonds, the hair on the back of my arms stood up. It was that feeling again, the sensation of being watched, not casually observed, but hunted. I stopped near a massive ice sculpture of a wolf, pretending to check my phone. I scanned the room. I saw familiar faces, alphas, betas, socialites trying to marry up. But no one seemed to be staring at me. "You're paranoid," I muttered, taking a sip of water. "It's just the stress. No one is watching you." "Miss?" I jumped, nearly spilling my water. A waiter in a crisp white uniform was standing at my elbow, holding a silver tray with a single glass of dark amber liquid. Whiskey. Top shelf, aged, expensive. "I didn't order this," I said, frowning. "I'm working." "It's not from the bar, miss," the waiter said, bowing his head slightly. "It's compliments of the gentleman." "Which gentleman?" I asked, scanning the immediate area. "Vargo? Trying to get me drunk so I'd blow the pitch?" The waiter didn't point. He simply angled his body toward the far end of the ballroom, toward the raised VIP balcony that overlooked the dance floor. It was a shadowed alcove, reserved for the highest-ranking wolves, usually kept empty until the royals arrived. "Up there," the waiter murmured, placing the glass in my hand before melting away into the crowd. I looked up. The balcony was mostly in shadow, draped in heavy crimson velvet, but standing at the railing, illuminated by the stray beam of a spotlight, was a figure. He wasn't wearing a towel anymore. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him like a second skin, black, sharp, and devastatingly tailored. His hands were resting on the velvet railing, looking relaxed, powerful. Even from this distance, across a room filled with 500 people, I could feel the weight of his gaze. It was heavy. It was physical. He lifted a glass of the same amber liquid to his lips, acknowledging me. My stomach dropped through the floor. It was him, the valet. "How the hell did a valet get into the VIP box?" I whispered, my grip tightening on the glass. He took a slow sip, his eyes never leaving mine. Then he did something that made my blood run cold. He reached into the breast pocket of his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a small, crumpled piece of green paper. My $5 bill. He held it up, just for a second, letting the light catch it. A trophy. A promise. He wasn't a valet. Valets didn't get VIP boxes. Valets didn't wear tuxedos that cost more than my car. Valets didn't look at you from across a crowded room and make the entire world disappear. I had tipped a guest. A very, very important guest. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through my confidence. I turned away, breaking eye contact, my heart thundering against my ribs like a war drum. I needed to hide. I needed to leave. But before I could take a step, the lights in the ballroom dimmed. The music stopped abruptly. A hush fell over the crowd, immediate and absolute. The master of ceremonies stepped onto the dais, his voice booming through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, wolves of the Alliance, please rise for His Royal Majesty." Chapter 5. The Investor. The announcement hung in the air like a guillotine blade waiting to drop. Please rise for His Royal Majesty. 500 people moved as one. It was a rustle of silk and a shuffle of leather soles, as the entire ballroom straightened their spines and turned their eyes toward the gilded double doors at the top of the grand staircase. The orchestra swelled into a majestic, pounding anthem that vibrated in my chest. We waited, and waited, and waited. The doors didn't open. The music kept playing, looping awkwardly back to the intro. A ripple of confused murmuring started to spread through the crowd like a contagion. The master of ceremonies, a sweating beta in a tight tuxedo, tapped his microphone nervously, his eyes darting around the stage as if hoping the king would materialize out of thin air. "He loves a dramatic entrance," a deep voice murmured right beside my ear. I jumped, nearly bobbling my whiskey glass. I spun around to find him, the valet, the VIP squatter, the man with the towel, standing mere inches from me. He wasn't up on the balcony anymore. He was here, on the floor, blending into the crowd of waiting elites like a wolf in sheep's clothing. Up close, the tuxedo was even more unfair. It emphasized the width of his shoulders and the dangerous taper of his waist. He smelled like power and expensive scotch. "Jesus!" I hissed, clutching my chest. "Do you have a bell? Or do you just enjoy sneaking up on women while they're waiting for royalty?" "I enjoy many things," he said, his golden eyes dancing with amusement. He took a sip of his drink, looking bored by the grandeur around us. "Waiting isn't one of them. You didn't finish your drink." I lost my appetite when I realized I tipped a man who apparently has access to the VIP box. I narrowed my eyes at him. "Who are you? And don't tell me you're a valet. Valets don't drink 20-year-old single malt on the clock." He swirled the amber liquid in his glass, watching the vortex. "Magnus," he said simply. No last name, no pack affiliation, just Magnus. "Magnus," I repeated. It suited him. It sounded heavy, ancient. "And what do you do, Magnus, besides hoard towels and sneak into restricted areas?" "I'm in acquisitions," he said, his lips curling into that smirk that made my stomach do a traitorous little flip. "I identify things I want, and I acquire them. I'm currently looking at a new investment." "An investor?" I deadpanned. "Great. Just what this party needs. Another ego with a checkbook." "I have a very large checkbook," he countered smoothly, stepping closer. The crowd was so focused on the empty stage that no one noticed the tall, dark stranger effectively boxing me in against a pillar. "And I'm told I'm very generous with my tips." I flushed, the memory of the $5 bill burning in my mind. "Look, about that, I assumed you were staff. It was an honest mistake. If you're an investor, you probably make more in a minute than I do in a month, so you can give me my $5 back." He chuckled, a low rumble that vibrated against my ribs. "No, I earned it. It was a transaction. You commanded, I obeyed." He leaned down, his voice dropping to a seductive whisper. "Although your zipper technique leaves much to be desired. You're very demanding." "I'm efficient," I corrected, trying to ignore the way his proximity was making my wolf howl. "And you're distracting. I'm here to work, Magnus. I need to impress the king when he finally decides to show up, not flirt with a hedge fund manager." "Impress the king?" He raised an eyebrow. "Why? Do you think he's worth impressing?" "I think his budget is worth impressing," I said pragmatically. "Personally, I think royals are stuffy, out-of-touch narcissists who need a PR overhaul, but I'm willing to sell my soul for the contract." Magnus stared at me. For a second, he looked genuinely stunned. Then, a slow, predatory grin spread across his face. It was the kind of smile a wolf gives right before it tears the throat out of a deer. "Stuffy, out-of-touch narcissist," he repeated, tasting the words. "Interesting assessment." Suddenly, the music cut out. The master of ceremonies' voice boomed, sounding desperate.
"Ladies and gentlemen, His Majesty is approaching the stage."
Magnus sighed, checking an invisible watch on his wrist. He downed the rest of his drink in one swallow and set the glass on a passing waiter's tray without looking. "Well," he said, straightening his cuffs. He looked down at me, his eyes burning with a terrifying intensity. "I suppose I should get back to work. It was a pleasure being commanded by you, Sienna." "Wait," I called out as he turned away. "Where are you going? The king is coming." "I know," Magnus said over his shoulder. "I wouldn't want to keep him waiting." Chapter 6. The Reveal. I watched, confused, as Magnus didn't head toward the back of the room or the bar. He walked straight toward the center aisle. The crowd was thick, a wall of bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder, all craning their necks toward the stage. But as Magnus approached the density of the pack, something strange happened. He didn't say, "Excuse me." He didn't push. He simply walked, and the crowd parted. It was like watching oil separate from water. Wolves, alpha males who prided themselves on never yielding ground, stepped back instinctively as he neared. Heads bowed before he even passed them. The path cleared for him as if by divine intervention, creating a wide, red carpet lane straight to the dais. "What is he doing?" I whispered to myself, a cold knot forming in my stomach. "Magnus, you idiot, you can't just walk up there." He reached the stairs of the stage. The master of ceremonies, who had been sweating bullets a moment ago, looked at Magnus and visibly collapsed with relief, bowing so low his nose nearly brushed the floorboards. Magnus didn't acknowledge him. He walked up the steps with that same lazy, lethal grace I had seen in the bathroom. He walked to the center of the stage, planted his feet, and looked out over the sea of 500 faces. The silence was absolute. It was a vacuum. No one breathed. Magnus reached into his tuxedo pocket. My heart stopped beating. I forgot how to inhale. He pulled out the crumpled green $5 bill. He held it up. The stage lights caught the miserable little piece of currency, illuminating George Lincoln's face for the entire obsidian pack to see. A ripple of confusion went through the room. Why is the king holding a $5 bill? Is it a metaphor? Is it a prop? Magnus brought the bill to his lips. He kissed it, a slow, deliberate press of his mouth against the paper. Then he tucked it into the breast pocket of his jacket, right over his heart, leaving a corner of it sticking out like a green silk handkerchief. He leaned into the microphone. His voice, amplified by the speakers, was the same deep rumble that had whispered in my ear moments ago.
"My apologies for the delay,"
he said, his tone dripping with dark amusement.
"I was detained, providing a service for a very demanding guest."
The crowd chuckled politely, nervous laughter rippling through the room. They thought it was a joke. I didn't laugh. I was frozen. I was a statue of horror. My blood had turned to ice slush. Magnus. King Magnus. I had told the Alpha King to put his abs away. I had called him Magic Mike. I had tipped him. I had just told him to his face that he was a stuffy, out-of-touch narcissist. I was dead. I was socially dead. I was professionally dead. I was going to be exiled to a pack in Antarctica. And then he found me. Whatever invisible connection linked us, he used it. His golden eyes swept the room and locked onto mine with the precision of a sniper scope. I was standing near the ice sculpture, clutching my empty glass like a lifeline. He smiled. It wasn't the polite smile of a monarch greeting his subjects. It was the smirk of the guy in the bathroom.
"However,"
Magnus continued, his eyes never leaving mine, pinning me to the spot,
I find that I enjoy being of service. In fact, I believe I am owed a debt, and I always collect my debts." The room followed his gaze. 500 heads turned. 500 pairs of eyes landed on me. I dropped my glass. It shattered on the marble floor, the sound exploding like a gunshot in the silent room.
"Oops," I squeaked. Magnus leaned back from the mic, his voice booming without it this time. "Play the waltz." Chapter 7. Flight Risk. Run. The command hit my brain with the force of a physical blow. It was the only coherent thought I had left. Run. Run now. Change your name. Move to a non-shifter jurisdiction, maybe a nice cave in the Himalayas. The orchestra struck up the opening notes of a waltz, something sweeping and romantic that sounded like the soundtrack to my execution. The crowd began to murmur, eyes darting between the king on the stage and me, the woman standing over a pile of broken glass. They were trying to figure out who I was. Was I his mate? His mistress? The assassin who had just tried to poison him with a bad tip? I didn't wait to find out. While everyone was distracted by the king descending the stairs, I made my move. "Sorry, excuse me, glass on the floor. Watch your step," I babbled, spinning on my heel and diving into the throng. I abandoned dignity. I power-walked, my heels clicking frantically against the floor. I wasn't heading for the main doors. That's where the paparazzi were. I headed for the service exit near the kitchens. I knew the layout of the Obsidian Hotel better than I knew my own apartment. I had studied the blueprints for the pitch I was never going to make. Stuffy, out-of-touch narcissist. Oh, God. Why didn't I just shoot myself? It would have been less painful. I elbowed past a startled duchess and ducked under the tray of a waiter carrying salmon puffs. "Emergency," I muttered to him. "Food poisoning. Very contagious." I saw the exit sign glowing red in the distance. It was beautiful. It was the gateway to freedom. Just 20 more feet. 10. I reached for the handle of the service door. My fingers grazed the cold metal. I was going to make it. I was going to vanish into the night and live the rest of my life as a hermit. A hand slammed against the door right above my head. It wasn't a slam of anger. It was a casual, immovable barrier. A tuxedo-clad arm blocked my path, the fabric straining against thick muscle. I froze. I knew that scent. Ozone, cedar, trouble. I slowly turned my head. Magnus was leaning against the doorframe, looking as if he had been standing there for hours, waiting for a bus. He wasn't even winded. He had crossed the entire ballroom, navigated a crowd of 500 people, and beat me to the back exit in less than 30 seconds. "Going somewhere?" he asked. His voice was light, conversational, but his eyes were dark, swirling with something possessive and intense. The corner of the $5 bill peeked out of his pocket, mocking me. I swallowed hard, clutching my purse to my chest like a shield. I think I left my oven on." "You live 3 states away, Sienna," he pointed out. "That would be a very impressive fire." "I have a smart oven," I lied. "It texted me. It's distressed." He stepped closer. He didn't touch me, but he crowded my space, forcing me to back up until my spine hit the door he was blocking. He caged me in with his body, placing his other hand on the wall on the other side of my head. "You're a terrible liar," he murmured, leaning down until our noses almost touched. "And you're a flight risk. I can smell the panic on you. It's adorable." "I'm not panicking," I said, my voice rising an octave. "I'm strategically retreating. There's a difference. Look, Your Majesty." "Magnus," he corrected sharply. "To you, I am Magnus, the man you hired." "I didn't hire you. I made a mistake." "A transaction is a transaction," he whispered, his gaze dropping to my lips before snapping back to my eyes. You paid for a service. I accepted the payment. That concludes the business arrangement. But now... He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind my ear. His fingers lingered on my jawline, his thumb brushing over my pulse point, which was hammering like a jackhammer. Now, he continued softly, we have the matter of the tip. You overpaid, and I am a man of honor. I cannot accept such generosity without offering something in return. I don't want a refund, I said quickly. Keep the $5, frame it, buy a candy bar, I don't care. I don't offer refunds, Magnus said, his smile widening, revealing the predator beneath the prince. I offer exchanges. You gave me something rare, your unfiltered honesty. Now, I'm going to take something of yours. My breath hitched. What? He leaned in, his lips brushing the shell of my ear. Dinner. You, me, tonight. I can't, I gasped. I have a flight. Cancel it, he commanded. It wasn't a request. The alpha tone rippled through the air, making my knees weak. Or I'll buy the airline and ground the plane myself. Chapter 8. The Negotiation. You can't buy an airline, I said, my voice sounding a lot less certain than I intended. That's illegal, or at least highly regulatory. There's paperwork. You can't just swipe a black card and ground a Boeing 747. Magnus didn't blink. He didn't even shift his weight. He just kept me pinned in the doorway with that terrifyingly casual stance, looking at me like I was a math problem he had already solved. I own the fuel refineries that supply the airline, he said, his tone conversational. And the holding company that insures their fleet. If I make a phone call, that plane stays on the tarmac until the next solstice. Do you really want to explain to your fellow passengers why their vacation was canceled because you refused to eat risotto with me? I gaped at him. The sheer, unadulterated audacity of this man. He wasn't bluffing. I could see it in his eyes. The calm, absolute certainty of a creature who had never been told no in his entire life. This is kidnapping, I accused, crossing my arms over my chest. With extra steps. It's aggressive hospitality, he corrected, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. And you still haven't said yes. I have a job, I argued, desperate for a foothold. I have a pitch meeting tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock sharp with Elder Thomas. I need to prep. I need to sleep. I do not have time to be the entertainment for a bored king who thinks harassment is a courting ritual. Magnus tilted his head. The movement was sharp, bird-like. Elder Thomas, the Obsidian Council's head of strategy? Yes, I said, lifting my chin. The contract is vital for my firm. So unless you're going to write me a check for 6 figures to cover the lost revenue, let me pass. Magnus looked thoughtful. He reached into his pocket, not the one with the $5 bill, thank God, and pulled out a sleek black smartphone. He tapped the screen twice. Consider it done, he said. Consider what done? The meeting, he said, sliding the phone back into his pocket. And the check. I'll have my treasurer wire the funds to your personal account by morning. Now that you're unemployed for the next 12 hours, you're free for dinner. I stared at him, my mouth opening and closing like a fish. You did not just... You can't cancel my meeting. I just did. Thomas works for me. If I tell him the meeting is postponed because the PR consultant is currently consulting with the Crown, he won't argue. He'll probably send you a fruit basket. He stepped back, breaking the cage he'd made with his body. He extended a hand toward the hallway leading to the private elevators. It was a gentlemanly gesture, totally at odds with the high-stakes coercion he had just performed. "Dinner, Sienna," he said softly. "I promise I won't bite. Unless you ask nicely." I looked at the service exit. Then I looked at him. I was trapped. If I ran, he'd chase me. If I flew, he'd ground me. If I worked, he'd fire my clients. I let out a groan of pure frustration, dropping my head back. Fine. One dinner. But I picked the topic of conversation. And if you mention zippers, I'm walking out. Agreed, Magnus said, his eyes gleaming with victory. After you. I brushed past him, care not to touch him, though the heat radiating off his body seemed to snag on my skin like static electricity. As I walked toward the elevators, I heard him moving behind me, silent, heavy steps. "By the way," he said, his voice low and amused, "what is the name of your PR firm again? Wolf and Whistle?" "Sharp-tooth strategy," I muttered, stabbing the elevator call button. "Why?" He stepped up beside me as the doors slid open, his reflection in the gold-plated metal looking like a dark god. "Just curious," he whispered. "I'm thinking of acquiring it." Chapter 9. The Hostile Takeover. I survived dinner. Barely. It was a blur of candlelight, wine that cost more than my car, and Magnus asking me questions that felt less like small talk and more like an interrogation into the depths of my soul. He wanted to know everything. Why I left my pack. Why I started my own business. Why I hated authority. I answered him, mostly because I was too terrified to lie and too tipsy to filter. But I had escaped. I had refused the nightcap, refused the ride home. I took a violently expensive Uber just to spite him, and locked myself in my hotel room. Now, it was morning. The sun was shining, my head was pounding, and I was ready to salvage my career. I marched into the conference room rented by the Obsidian Council at 7:55 a.m. I was wearing my apology armor, a navy blue power suit, a tight bun, and glasses I didn't actually need, but wore because they made me look like I read fine print for fun. "Elder Thomas," I began, swinging the door open with practiced energy. "I am so sorry about the confusion last night. I can assure you that the rumors of my—" I stopped dead. Elder Thomas wasn't at the head of the table. In fact, Elder Thomas wasn't in the room at all. Sitting at the head of the long, polished mahogany table, spinning slowly in the high-backed leather chair, was Magnus. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo today. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit with the top button of his white shirt undone. No tie. He looked rested, dangerous, and irritatingly at home. "You're late," he said, checking the invisible watch on his wrist. "I'm 5 minutes early," I snapped, dropping my briefcase on the table with a thud. "Where is Thomas, and why are you sitting in the client's chair?" "Thomas has been reassigned," Magnus said, stopping the spin of the chair with one foot. He picked up a thick stack of documents from the table, my pitch deck. "He lacked vision. I, however, see a lot of potential here." He tossed the file back onto the table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped right at my hip. "What did you do?" I asked, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "I made a few calls," he said, standing up. He walked around the table, prowling toward me. It turns out Sharptooth's strategy was looking for investors. Or rather, they weren't, but everyone has a price. I bought the controlling stake at 8 a.m. this morning. My knees nearly gave out. I gripped the edge of the table. "You bought my company?" "I acquired it," he corrected, stopping a foot away from me. "Technically, I am now your majority shareholder, which makes me your boss. And as your boss, I have decided to pivot our strategy." "Pivot to what?" I whispered, horror dawning on me. "Bankruptcy?" "To me," he said simply. "I am firing all your other clients. You are now exclusively retained to manage the royal image, specifically my image." "I don't work for dictators," I hissed. "I built this firm to be independent." "And you are independent," he reasoned, leaning against the table and crossing his ankles. "You are independently wealthy now, considering the buyout price. But you are contractually obligated to fulfill the terms of the employment agreement, or face a lawsuit that will bury you until the next ice age." He picked up a pen and held it out to me. "Sign the retainer, Sienna. You wanted to fix the royals?
Here is your chance. Fix me." I looked at the pen. I looked at him. I wanted to stab him with it, but I also saw the challenge in his eyes. He wasn't just trapping me. He was daring me. I snatched the pen from his hand. "Fine, but I have conditions. Absolute creative control. No veto power." "Granted," he said, his eyes darkening. "And strict professional boundaries," I added, pointing the pen at his chest. He smirked, leaning forward until his face was inches from mine. "We'll see about that. But for now, rule number 1 of your new contract." His gaze dropped to my chest, then back up to my eyes. "You handle the king's wardrobe, personally, since you seem to have such strong opinions on my zippers." Chapter 10. Late Nights. "No," I said, slashing a red marker across the photo on the whiteboard. "Absolutely not. You look like a vampire attending a funeral." "I like that suit," Magnus argued from the couch in the corner of my office. It had been 3 days. 3 days of hell. 3 days of Magnus essentially moving into my office, criticizing my coffee, and refusing to wear anything that didn't scream, "I will execute you if you look at me wrong." "The goal is approachable leader," I reminded him, tapping the whiteboard. "Not gothic warlord. The polls show that the southern packs think you're distant, cold. We need softer colors. Maybe a blue tie? A smile? Do you know how to smile without looking like you're about to eat someone?" Magnus leaned back, stretching his long legs out. He had discarded his jacket hours ago, and his sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms that were distracting me more than I cared to admit. "I don't smile at nothing, Sienna," he said lazily. "That's a sign of madness. Or weakness." "It's a sign of being human," I countered, throwing the marker onto the desk, or at least pretending to be. I rubbed my temples. It was late. The office building was empty, the cleaning crew having left hours ago. Outside, the sky was a bruised purple, heavy with rain clouds that had been threatening to burst all afternoon. The air in the room felt thick, charged with the approaching storm and the unrelenting tension between us. Magnus stood up. The movement was fluid, silent.
He walked over to the desk where I was slumped over a pile of fabric swatches. "You're working too hard," he murmured. "It's past midnight." "I'm working hard because my client is difficult," I muttered, not looking up. "If you would just agree to the navy blazer, we could go home." "I don't want to go home," he said. His voice was closer now. He was standing right behind my chair. "My home is a castle filled with empty rooms and people who are afraid to speak above a whisper. I prefer it here." I swiveled my chair around to face him. "You prefer my cramped office that smells like old toner?" "I prefer the company," he said. He placed a hand on the armrest of my chair, leaning down. "You're the only one who tells me no. It's addicting." My breath hitched. He was doing it again, closing the distance, wrapping me in his scent. The air pressure in the room seemed to drop. "Magnus," I warned, my voice breathy. "Rule number 2, professional boundaries." "I never signed that part," he whispered. He reached out, his fingers grazing the fabric of my blouse, right near the collar. "You're tense again. Should I help you with your zipper?" I opened my mouth to retort, to tell him to back off. But a sudden, blinding flash of white light illuminated the room, followed instantly by a crack of thunder that shook the floorboards. Crack! Boom! The overhead lights flickered once, twice, and then total, suffocating darkness. The building's power grid died. The hum of the AC unit cut out. The only light came from the lightning flashing outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting jagged shadows across Magnus's face. He didn't move away. In the sudden dark, I felt his hand tighten on my chair. "Well?" His voice came from the darkness, low and velvety. "It seems we're trapped." Chapter 11. The Scent of Rain. The darkness was absolute, a heavy velvet curtain that dropped over the world, severing us from reality. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the drumming of the rain against the glass and the erratic thumping of my own heart. Then, a beam of light cut through the gloom. Magnus had activated the flashlight on his phone, placing it face up on my desk so the light diffused against the ceiling, casting long, strange shadows across the room. "Are you afraid of the dark, Sienna?" His voice rumbled, closer than I expected. "I'm afraid of tripping over a filing cabinet and suing you for workplace negligence," I lied, my voice shaking slightly. "Stay where you are. I think I have emergency candles somewhere." "Sit," he commanded softly. I hesitated, then sank onto the plush rug in the center of the room, abandoning the chair. He sat across from me, his long legs folded, looking less like a king and more like a camper at the world's most expensive bonfire. Without the glare of the overhead fluorescents, his face was softer. The sharp angles of his jaw were smoothed by the shadows, and his eyes... God, his eyes were glowing. Not literally, but they caught the ambient light, reflecting it back with an intensity that made my breath catch. "You said you prefer it here," I whispered, breaking the silence. "Why? You have a palace. You have servants who probably iron your socks." "That is exactly why," he said, leaning back on his hands. "Do you know what it is like to never touch a door handle? To never pour your own drink? To have every conversation scripted before you even enter the room? He looked at the window, where lightning forked across the sky. It is a cage, Sienna. A gilded, comfortable cage. But a cage nonetheless. Everyone wants something from me. Favor, power, money. And what do I want? I asked, hugging my knees to my chest. He looked back at me. The air between us crackled, charged with more than just static electricity. You want to fix my zipper, he teased, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. And you want me to leave you alone, which makes you the only honest person I have met in a decade. I don't want you to leave me alone, I admitted before I could stop myself. The darkness was like a truth serum. I don't fit in your world, Magnus. I'm a PR strategist from a minor pack. I eat takeout. I curse at traffic. I don't do tiaras. I hate tiaras, he murmured. He shifted, crawling forward on his hands and knees until he was right in front of me. And I am bored of women who fit in my world. They are all the same, perfume and ambition wrapped in silk. He reached out. His hand hovered near my face, trembling slightly. The king of alphas, the man who commanded armies with a glance, was trembling. You smell like rain, he whispered. Real rain, not the bottled stuff. He cupped my cheek. His thumb brushed over my lower lip, dragging it down slightly. My eyes fluttered shut. My brain was screaming, bad idea, but my body was singing. I leaned into his touch, seeking the warmth, the solidity of him. Magnus, I breathed. Tell me to stop. He groaned, his forehead resting against mine. Command me, Sienna. Tell me to stop, and I will. My voice failed me. I didn't want him to stop. I wanted him to ruin me. He tilted his head. His lips were millimeters from mine. I could feel the heat of his breath, smell the rich, intoxicating scent of cedar and desire. I parted my lips, ready to close the gap, ready to make the mistake that would probably cost me my job and my sanity. Buzz click. The overhead lights slammed back on with the subtlety of a flashbang grenade. The sudden brightness was blinding. The hum of the air conditioner roared back to life, shattering the intimacy into a million jagged pieces. We sprang apart like guilty teenagers. I scrambled backward, blinking rapidly, my face burning. Magnus sat back on his heels, shielding his eyes. A look of pure, unadulterated frustration etched onto his features. The moment was gone, killed by the electric company. Right, I choked out, scrambling to my feet and smoothing my skirt, refusing to look at him. Power's back, meeting adjourned. Go home, Magnus. He stood slowly, his mask of indifference sliding back into place, though his eyes were still dark, still hungry. He walked to the door, pausing with his hand on the frame. We aren't done, Sienna, he said, his voice rough. The lights may be on, but I still see you. Chapter 12. The Jealousy Trap. The gallery opening was a nightmare of pretension. It was exactly the kind of event I had spent my career avoiding. Champagne that tasted like vinegar, abstract art that looked like a toddler's tantrum, and wolves who sniffed the air to check your bloodline before they shook your hand. But I was here because Magnus was here, and as his image consultant, my job was to make sure he didn't growl at any donors. Stop scowling, I hissed out of the side of my mouth, adjusting the lapel of his midnight blue tuxedo. You look like you're plotting a murder. I am, Magnus muttered, scanning the room with disdain. I'm plotting the murder of the artist who painted that red square and priced it at $50,000. It represents the duality of the soul, I said, smoothing his tie. Smile, the press is at 3 o'clock. He didn't smile, but he did lean into my touch, just for a second, grounding himself.
Since the blackout in the office 2 nights ago, the air between us had been radioactive. We hadn't talked about the almost kiss, but it hung over us, a heavy, unacknowledged promise. "Oh, look!" A shrill voice cut through the noise. "It's the king and his handler." I stiffened. Lady Genevieve of the Eastern High Pack glided toward us. She was stunning, blonde, and wore a dress that cost more than my firm's annual revenue.
She had been trying to mate with Magnus for 3 years. "Your Majesty," she purred, ignoring me entirely to place a manicured hand on Magnus's arm. "You look devastating. I was hoping to steal you for a moment. My father, Alpha Hollis, is dying to discuss the border treaties." Magnus looked at her hand on his arm, then at her face. "I am working, Genevieve." "Working?" She let out a tinkling, condescending laugh, finally glancing at me with eyes like chips of ice. "Oh, you mean with the hired help? Surely she can fetch you a drink while the adults talk. Be a dear, won't you?" She waved a hand at me dismissively. "2 dry martinis. Chop chop." The insult slapped me across the face. Hired help. The embarrassment burned hot in my cheeks. I opened my mouth to retort, to tell her exactly where she could shove her olive. But Magnus moved first. He didn't just step away from her. He recoiled as if she were contagious. He took a sidestep, placing his body firmly between Genevieve and me. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Lady Genevieve," Magnus said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a gavel strike. "You seem confused." "I beg your pardon, sire?" she stammered, her smile faltering. "Sienna is not the help," Magnus stated, his voice ringing with cold, lethal clarity. "She is the architect of my reign. She is the only person in this room whose opinion I value, and she does not fetch drinks." He reached out and took my hand, intertwining his fingers with mine in front of the press, the cameras, and the entire Eastern High Pack. "If you wish to speak to me," he continued, staring Genevieve down until she visibly shrank, "you speak to her first. If she decides you are worth my time, she will let me know. Until then, chop chop." He turned his back on her, pulling me with him through the stunned crowd. "Magnus," I whispered, my heart hammering as he dragged me toward the exit.
"You can't just insult the Eastern Alpha's daughter."
"She insulted you," he growled, pushing through the double doors and out into the cool night air where his limousine was waiting. "She is lucky I didn't have her escorted out." He practically threw me into the back of the limo and climbed in after me, slamming the door shut. The privacy partition was already up. We were alone in the dark leather interior. "You have to be diplomatic," I argued, though my voice was weak. "That's the whole point of my job." "To hell with diplomacy," he snapped. He turned to me, his eyes blazing. He looked furious, but not at me. "Do you think I care about their treaties, their politics? I spent the entire night watching you." "Magnus." "I watched you fix my tie. I watched you laugh at that waiter's joke. I watched you breathe." He grabbed my shoulders, pulling me toward him until our knees knocked together. "I am going insane, Sienna. Do you not realize? I don't see them. I only look at you." Chapter 13. The Push. The ride home was silent, but it was a loud silence. It was the sound of walls crumbling. When the limo pulled up to my apartment building, I didn't wait for the driver. I scrambled out, mumbled a goodbye, and fled. I ran up the 3 flights of stairs to my apartment, locked the door, and leaned against it, hyperventilating. I only look at you. The words echoed in my skull. This was bad. This was catastrophic. I was falling for him. I was falling for the Alpha King, a man who lived in a world of assassins, politics, and women like Genevieve who would eat me alive for sport. I was a PR consultant. I was safe. I was independent. If I stayed, I would lose myself. I would become just another headline, another mystery woman to be chewed up by the press and discarded when he got bored. And he would get bored. Kings always did. I couldn't do it. I had to protect myself. I sat down at my laptop, my hands shaking. I typed out the email. Subject: Resignation and contract termination. 2. His Majesty King Magnus. Body: Due to a conflict of interest and irreconcilable professional differences, I am hereby terminating our agreement effective immediately. The buyout funds will be returned. I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. Then I turned off my phone, unplugged my router, and crawled into bed, pulling the duvet over my head. I spent the next day in a fugue state. I didn't go to the office. I ignored the pounding on my door from my assistant. I ate ice cream and watched reality TV, trying to numb the ache in my chest. I convinced myself I had done the right thing. I had saved myself from heartbreak. I was strong. I was fierce. I was miserable. At 8 p.m., a knock came at the door. Not the frantic pounding of my assistant. A singular, heavy, authoritative knock. I froze, spoon halfway to my mouth. It couldn't be. He wouldn't come here. He was a king. He had dignity. He probably had accepted the resignation and moved on to the next firm. The knock came again, louder. "Sienna!" A deep voice called through the wood. "Open the door!" My heart leaped into my throat. I wrapped my robe tighter around myself and padded barefoot to the door. I didn't open it. I looked through the peephole. Magnus was standing in my hallway, but he wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing dark jeans and a black t-shirt that stretched tight across his chest. He looked exhausted. His hair was messy, as if he had been running his hands through it all day. He looked human. "Go away," I said through the door, my voice trembling. "I resigned, Magnus. Read your email." "I deleted it," he said flatly. "I don't accept resignations from people who are lying to themselves." "I'm not lying. It's a conflict of interest." "The only conflict," he shouted, slamming his hand against the doorframe, making me jump, "is that you are terrified of what is happening between us, and you are trying to run. You run when you're scared." "Sienna, I know that about you."
"I am not scared," I yelled back. "I am professional."
"Then open the door and tell me to my face," he challenged. His voice dropped, losing the anger, replacing it with a raw desperation that broke my heart.
Please, open the door. I am not here as the king. I left the crown in the car.
I hesitated. My hand hovered over the lock. My brain screamed danger. My wolf screamed mate. "Then who are you?" I whispered. There was a pause, a long, heavy silence.
"I'm the guy you tipped $5, he said softly, "and I'm just trying to return the investment."
Chapter 14. The Apartment. The lock clicked. It was a small sound, but in the silence of the hallway, it sounded like a cannon shot. I slowly turned the handle and pulled the door open.
Magnus didn't barge in. He didn't stride past me with the entitlement of a king reclaiming his territory. He stood on the threshold, waiting. He looked impossibly large for my narrow doorway, the hallway light casting his shadow long across my cheap laminate flooring. In the jeans and t-shirt, stripped of his tuxedo armor, he looked raw. Dangerous, yes, but human. "Well?" I whispered, hugging my robe tighter around myself, shielding my heart as much as my body. "Are you coming in, or are you going to charge me for the heating bill?" He stepped inside. The air in my apartment instantly changed. It became heavier, charged with the scent of rain and cedar that clung to him. He closed the door behind him and locked it. I watched him scan the room. It was mortifying. My apartment wasn't a palace. It was a chaotic explosion of my life. A stack of unread fashion magazines on the coffee table, a half-eaten carton of lo mein on the counter, and a bra drying on the radiator. "It's not regal," I muttered, moving to snatch the bra and stuff it into a couch cushion. I wasn't expecting company, especially not the kind that usually sits on a throne. "It's real," Magnus said. He walked over to the bookshelf,
running a finger along the spine of a battered paperback. "My rooms are museums. You can't touch anything without fear of breaking a dynasty. This," he looked at the lo mein carton, "this smells like life." "It smells like garlic sauce," I corrected, my nerves fraying. "Magnus, why are you here? Really? You can't just show up in jeans and pretend we didn't spend the last week fighting." "I'm here because I'm tired of fighting," he said, turning to face me. "And because I'm hungry. Do you have anything other than noodles?" I blinked. "You want food?" "I want to do something normal," he admitted, his shoulders dropping slightly. "I want to be in a room where no one is bowing. I want to make tea. Do you have tea? Or do you run purely on caffeine and sarcasm?" "Top cupboard, left side, Earl Grey." I watched, mesmerized, as the Alpha King navigated my tiny kitchenette. He looked ridiculous. He was too tall for the cabinets. He had to duck to avoid hitting the light fixture. He filled the kettle with a concentration usually reserved for war councils. When he couldn't find a spoon, he improvised with a fork. It was endearing. It was domestic. It was terrifying. "You're bad at this," I noted, walking over to lean against the counter. "I have people," he grunted, fumbling with the tea bag. "I haven't made my own tea since I was 12. "You're a disaster," I laughed softly. He froze. He set the mug down and turned to me. The playfulness vanished from his eyes, replaced by that dark, swirling intensity that made my knees weak. "Sienna," he said. He took a step forward. "I didn't come here for the tea." "I know," I breathed. I was backed against the counter now. There was nowhere to run, and for the first time in my life, I didn't want to. "You ran because you think I'll get bored," he said, reading my mind with terrifying accuracy. "You think you're just a novelty, a challenge to be conquered." "Aren't I?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You're the king, Magnus. I'm just the girl who didn't know who you were." "You're the only girl who saw me," he corrected. He reached out, his hands finding my waist, pulling me flush against him. The heat of his body soaked through my thin robe. "I don't want a challenge, Sienna. I want an equal. I want someone who will yell at me when I'm being an ass. I want the woman who tipped me $5 because she thought I was worth it." "You were worth at least 10, I whispered, tears pricking my eyes. He groaned, a low, guttural sound that vibrated against my chest.
Stop talking. Make me, I challenged. He did. He kissed me. It wasn't a tentative first date kiss. It was an explosion. It was days of arguments, office tension, and denied attraction colliding in a single moment. His lips were demanding, possessing, claiming every breath in my lungs. I wound my arms around his neck, burying my hands in his hair, pulling him closer, desperate to erase the space between us. He lifted me effortlessly, setting me on the kitchen counter, stepping between my legs to get closer. The mug of tea was forgotten. The contract was forgotten. There was only him. Mine, he growled against my mouth. Yours, I surrendered. Chapter 15. The Morning After. I woke up to the sound of a shutter clicking. For a second, I thought I was dreaming. I was warm, cocooned in heavy blankets and heavier arms. Magnus was asleep beside me, his face buried in the crook of my neck, his breathing slow and deep. The morning sun was streaming through the window. Click, 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 click. The sound was coming from outside. I frowned, shifting carefully so I didn't wake the sleeping king. I sat up, pulling the sheet with me, and peered through the slat of my blinds. My blood turned to ice. The street below my apartment building was a zoo. There were vans with satellite dishes. There were reporters with microphones. And there were at least 20 photographers with long lens cameras pointed directly at my fourth-floor window. Oh my God, I whispered. I scrambled out of bed, tripping over Magnus's discarded jeans. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand. 53 missed calls, 102 text messages. I opened the news app. The headline was in bold, size 72 font. The King's Secret. Alpha Magnus spotted entering apartment of mystery brunette. Subheadline: Who is the commoner who captured the crown? No, I gasped, clutching the phone to my chest. No, no, no. This was exactly what I feared. The exposure, the judgment. My privacy was gone. My business would be dissected. My life was now public property. Sienna? Magnus's voice was rough with sleep. I spun around. He was sitting up, the sheet pooling at his waist, looking like a Greek god who had just woken up from a nap. He rubbed his eyes, then saw my face. He was awake in an instant. What is it? He demanded, swinging his legs out of bed. Don't go near the window, I hissed, diving to intercept him. They're out there, the press, the paparazzi, they know you're here. Magnus paused. He listened, his alpha hearing picking up what I couldn't. He heard the shutters. He heard the chatter on the street. His expression shifted. The soft, domestic lover from last night vanished. The king returned. His jaw tightened, and his eyes darkened to a terrifying shade of gold. They followed me, he said coldly. I took a private car. I wasn't followed. Well, someone tipped them off, I said, pacing the room, my hands shaking. Magnus, this is a disaster. I'm ruined. My clients will leave. My landlord will evict me. I'm going to be the royal mistress forever. Stop, he commanded. He walked over to me, ignoring his nudity, ignoring the window. He grabbed my shoulders and held me still. You are not a mistress, and you are not ruined. You don't understand, I cried. This is your world. I just live in it.
They're going to eat me alive.
Let them try, he growled. He released me and walked to where his jeans lay on the floor. He pulled his phone from the pocket. He didn't look worried. He looked lethal. He dialed a number and put it to his ear. It's me, he said. His voice was calm, but it was the calm before a nuclear detonation. I'm at Sienna's apartment. The press is outside. I want them gone. He paused, listening. I don't care if they have permits, he snapped. By the street. By the sidewalk. Declare it a construction zone. If a single photo of her silhouette is published, I will buy the publication and burn it to the ground. Do you understand me? Scorched earth." He hung up and tossed the phone onto the bed. He turned to me. "Pack a bag," he said. "What? I'm not running." "We aren't running," he said, walking toward the bathroom to shower. "We are relocating. You wanted to fix my image? Congratulations, Sienna. We have a press conference to attend. Tonight." Chapter 16. The Public Declaration. The dress was a weapon. That was the only way to describe it. It had arrived an hour ago, delivered by a courier who looked terrified of Magnus. It was black velvet, strapless, with a slit that went up to my thigh. It was elegant, severe, and utterly commanding. It wasn't a dress for a debutante. It was a dress for a queen. "Are you ready?" Magnus asked from the doorway of the hotel suite we had retreated to. I stared at myself in the mirror. My hair was swept up, my lips painted a deep crimson. I didn't look like the girl who ate lo mein in her robe. I looked dangerous. "I'm terrified," I admitted to his reflection. Magnus walked up behind me. He was wearing his formal regalia, a black tuxedo with the obsidian crest pinned to the lapel. He looked breathtaking. He placed his hands on my shoulders. "Good," he whispered. "Fear keeps you sharp. But remember one thing tonight." "What?" "You are the woman who ordered the Alpha King to zip her dress." He grinned, his eyes sparkling. "These people, the press, the court, they are nothing compared to you. Command the room, Sienna, just like you command me." I took a deep breath. I squared my shoulders. "Okay, let's do this." The drive to the winter solstice ball was a blur of lights and motorcycle escorts. When the limo stopped, the noise was deafening. The flashbulbs were like lightning storms. Magnus got out first. He buttoned his jacket, scanned the crowd with a sneer, and then turned back to the car. He extended his hand to me. I took it. As I stepped out, the crowd went wild. Questions were shouted. "Who is she? Is it true?" I didn't look down. I looked straight ahead, gripping Magnus's hand like a lifeline. He pulled me to his side, tucking my hand into the crook of his arm. "Eyes up," he murmured. "Walk." We walked the red carpet. I felt the judgment, the curiosity, the envy. But I also felt Magnus. He was a solid wall of protection, his body shielding me, his focus entirely on me. We reached the doors of the grand ballroom, the same room where I had tipped him $5 just weeks ago. The doors swung open. The herald announced us. His Royal Majesty King Magnus and his guest. The silence was instant. Every head turned. The music faltered. Magnus didn't lead me to the VIP box. He led me straight to the center of the dance floor. He stopped. He looked at the conductor of the orchestra, who was holding his baton in midair, looking petrified. Magnus raised a hand. "Stop the music," he commanded. His voice filled the cavernous room without a microphone. The orchestra went silent. The room held its breath. Magnus turned to me, ignoring the thousands of eyes watching us. He reached into his tuxedo pocket. My heart hammered against my ribs. Was he going to propose? Was he going to fire me publicly? He pulled out a small gold frame. Inside the glass, pressed flat and smooth, was a wrinkled $5 bill. The crowd gasped. They recognized it from the speech. Magnus held the frame up for the room to see, then handed it to me. "You once paid me for a service," he said, his voice ringing out, clear and amused. You tipped me because you thought I did a good job. I believe I have yet to fully earn it. He bowed. He actually bowed, low, respectful, and subservient, in front of me. May I have this dance, my lady? He asked, looking up at me with wicked devotion. Or do I need to earn another $5? Chapter 17. The Frame. The silence in the ballroom was so profound I could hear the air conditioning humming 3 floors up. King Magnus, the Alpha of Alphas, the ruler of the Shifter Alliance, was bent at the waist. He was bowing. To me. I stood there, clutching the heavy gold frame against my chest like a shield, staring at the top of his dark, glossy head. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a mixture of terror and an overwhelming, chest-aching affection. Magnus, I hissed under my breath, my voice barely audible. Stand up. You're freaking everyone out. People are going to faint. He straightened slowly, his movements fluid and deliberate. He didn't look embarrassed. He looked triumphant. His golden eyes locked onto mine, ignoring the hundreds of gasps rippling through the crowd like a shock wave. Let them faint, he said, his voice amplified by the acoustics of the silent room. It will give them something to do. He turned to the crowd, placing a possessive hand on the small of my back. The heat of his palm burned through the velvet of my dress, branding me. He gestured to the frame in my hands. You are all confused. Magnus addressed the court. His tone was conversational, relaxed, a stark contrast to the rigid tension of the room. You see your king standing with a woman you do not know, holding a wrinkled $5 bill, and you wonder if I have lost my mind. A few nervous titters broke out. Lady Genevieve, standing near the front, looked like she had swallowed a lemon whole. I haven't, Magnus continued, his voice hardening slightly, gaining that regal edge. I have simply found something I was missing. He took the frame from my hands and held it up again. This, he said, tapping the glass, was the first thing Sienna ever gave me. She didn't give me flattery. She didn't give me submission. She gave me a tip. He looked down at me, his expression softening into a smirk that curled my toes. She walked into my room, saw me in a towel, told me to put the abs away, and commanded me to zip her dress because she had work to do. She treated the King of the North like a valet because she was too busy building her own empire to care about mine. The crowd erupted in laughter. It wasn't polite laughter. It was genuine, shocked amusement. The tension snapped. The terrifying Alpha King was telling a joke on himself. I have spent my life surrounded by wolves who tell me what I want to hear, Magnus said, the humor fading into solemnity. I do not need another follower. I have an army of those. I need someone who is not afraid to tell me the truth, someone who sees the man, not the crown. He handed the frame back to me, his fingers lingering on mine. Sienna is the only wolf in this room brave enough to command me, he declared, his voice ringing with finality. And from this day forward, she is the only one who has permission to do so. He turned back to the conductor, who was trembling so hard his baton was vibrating. Music, Magnus ordered. Something efficient. She hates wasting time. The orchestra launched into a waltz. Magnus swept me into his arms before I could process the fact that he had just publicly declared me his equal. One hand gripped my waist, the other clasped my hand, and he pulled me flush against his chest. We moved. It wasn't like dancing. It was like flying. He led with absolute confidence, guiding me through the turns, but he held me like I was precious, like I was fragile glass that he would kill to protect. You framed the money, I whispered, looking up at him as we spun. You actually framed it.
It's the best investment I ever made, he murmured, his eyes dancing. Look at them, Sienna. Look at the room.
I tore my gaze away from him and looked around. The court wasn't glaring at me anymore. They were smiling. They were whispering, but the tone had changed. It wasn't judgment. It was admiration. You humanized yourself. I realized, my PR brain kicking in even in the middle of a fairy tale. You used the story to bridge the gap between the crown and the people. You made them laugh. You made them relate to you.
I didn't do anything,
Magnus corrected, spinning me out and pulling me back in hard.
You did. You are the image consultant, remember? I just followed your lead.
I didn't tell you to bow, I said breathlessly.
No,
he agreed, leaning down until his lips brushed my ear.
That was my idea. A king only bows to his queen.
My breath hitched.
Magnus, don't panic,
he soothed, sensing my spike in heart rate.
I won't make you wear a tiara tonight, but tomorrow we negotiate terms.
The song ended. The room erupted in applause, thunderous, genuine applause. Even Lady Genevieve was clapping, albeit weakly, looking like she wanted to be anywhere else on earth. Magnus didn't let me go. He kept his arm around my waist, shielding me from the sudden surge of well-wishers and photographers.
I'm bored,
he announced suddenly, loud enough for the nearby dignitaries to hear. We just got here, I whispered. We have to do the rounds. The northern ambassadors are waiting.
I don't care about the northern ambassadors, he said, checking his watch. I have fulfilled my public duty. I have danced. I have smiled. I have declared my intentions.
He looked down at me, his eyes dark with a hunger that had nothing to do with politics and everything to do with the fact that my dress had a very high slit.
Get your coat, Sienna,
he commanded, steering me toward the exit,
ignoring the master of ceremonies who was trying to intercept us. Where are we going? I asked, trying to keep up with his long strides as we left the ballroom, leaving the stunned court in our wake. Back to the hotel? He pushed open the double doors, the cool night air hitting our faces. He didn't stop at the limo. He pulled me closer, his voice dropping to a rough, gravelly whisper that sent shivers straight to my core. No, he said, his lips grazing the side of my neck. We're going to your apartment. I believe I still owe you some interest on that $5, and I intend to pay it. All night long. Chapter 18. Epilogue. 6 months. That's how long it had been since I tipped the king of the Shifter Alliance $5. In that time, the world had turned upside down. My tiny apartment was currently being used as a storage unit for my old life, mostly because I now lived in the royal wing of the Obsidian Palace. Sharptooth Strategy had gone from a one-woman show to the most feared consulting firm on the continent. I had hired 3 assistants just to manage my email inbox. But some things never changed. Elder Thomas, I said, tapping the glass table of the war room with a stylus. I don't care if it's tradition. We are not doing a sword dance at the summer solstice. It looks aggressive. The polling data says the pack wants unity, not a reminder that we have sharp, pointy objects. The room full of ancient, scarred alpha wolves fell silent. 6 months ago, they would have laughed me out of the room. Now, they took notes. Unity, Thomas grumbled, scribbling on his pad. Fine. What do you suggest? A picnic? A charity gala, I corrected. High ticket prices. Proceeds go to the border packs. It makes us look benevolent and rich. Everyone wins. I checked my watch. 2 p.m. I had exactly 10 minutes to wrap this up before my conference call with the Western Territories. Being the unofficial queen of image was exhausting. Suddenly, the heavy double doors of the war room flew open. They didn't just open.
They banged against the walls with the force of a hurricane entry. Every head in the room snapped up. King Magnus stood in the doorway. He wasn't wearing his crown or his ceremonial robes. He was wearing a charcoal suit that I had picked out for him, the top button of his shirt undone, his hair slightly windswept. He looked frantic. My heart stopped. What happened? Is it the southern border? Did the treaties fail? Magnus ignored the 12 council members staring at him. He marched straight toward me, his long strides eating up the distance in seconds. Emergency, he stated, his voice grave. I stood up, adrenaline spiking. What kind of emergency? PR? Military? Wardrobe, he said, stopping right in front of me. The room went dead silent. Elder Thomas dropped his pen. Wardrobe? I repeated, blinking. Magnus, I am in the middle of a strategy meeting regarding the future of our cultural integration. You interrupted the council for wardrobe? It's critical, Magnus insisted, his face a mask of stone-cold seriousness, though I saw the familiar, dangerous glint in his golden eyes. I have a malfunction. It requires immediate expert attention, and since you are the only one allowed to touch the king's clothes... He let the sentence hang. He held out his hand. I looked at the council members. They were all studiously looking at their notepads, terrified to intervene in whatever domestic insanity was happening. I sighed, fighting the smile that was threatening to ruin my fierce boss persona. Gentlemen, I said, grabbing my tablet, we'll reconvene tomorrow. Apparently, the crown is falling apart. Again. I took Magnus's hand. He gripped my fingers tight, pulling me out of the war room and down the corridor. He walked fast, dragging me past the guards who pretended not to see us. You are ridiculous, I hissed as we rounded the corner toward my private office. A wardrobe malfunction?
Really? That's the best you could come up with?
I was bored, he admitted, not slowing down. And I missed you. You've been in meetings since dawn. I haven't seen you for 6 hours. It's unacceptable. It's called a job, Magnus. You should try it sometime. I am the king. My job is to rule. And currently, I am ruling that you need a break. He kicked open the door to my office, the new one, with the mahogany desk and the view of the palace gardens, and pulled me inside. He slammed the door shut and locked it in one fluid motion. Now, he said, backing me up until my legs hit the edge of my desk. About that malfunction. He lifted me up, setting me on the polished wood, sweeping a stack of polling reports onto the floor without a second thought. He stepped between my legs, his hands finding my hips, pulling me to the edge. I don't see any malfunction, I said, running my hands up the lapels of his suit. You look perfect, as always. The malfunction, he murmured, leaning down until his lips hovered inches from mine, is that I am wearing far too many clothes, and so are you. My breath hitched. Magnus, it's 2 p.m. I have a call with the West. Let it ring, he growled, burying his face in the crook of my neck, inhaling deeply. They can wait. I can't. He reached behind me, his fingers finding the zipper of my dress. The sound of it sliding down was deafening in the quiet office. The cool air hit my skin, followed instantly by the searing heat of his hands. It brought me back. The hotel room, the steam, the towel. The moment my life changed for $5. You know, I whispered, tilting my head back as he kissed his way down my throat. This isn't the bathroom, Magnus. He paused. He looked up, his golden eyes burning with a love so fierce it consumed me whole. A slow, wicked grin spread across his face, the same grin he'd worn when I called him Magic Mike. I don't care, he said. And he didn't. Quick favor, don't go anywhere yet. If you thought Magnus was obsessed, you are not ready for this next alpha. In this story, she accidentally pepper sprays the king in the face, but instead of crying, he inhales it, roars spicy, and chases her down. It is unhinged. Click the video on your screen right now. Seriously, click it.